My name is Tom Lawrence. I'm a director of chapter relationships for First Tee headquarters. I'm honored and delighted to introduce today's speaker, Joan Garry. Quite a number of you may already be familiar with her, as she's a champion for the nonprofit sector. She writes a highly successful blog for staff and board leaders at joangarry.com. And if you don't subscribe to it, you should. Additionally, she has the #1 nonprofit podcast on iTunes titled Nonprofits Are Messy. And if you don't listen to that, you should. She's also the author of Joan Garry's Guide to Nonprofit Leadership, the book that should be handed to every new nonprofit staff member and every new board member. Joan began her career as part of the management team that launched MTV in 1981. How cool is that? But before I go any further, I want to do a quick icebreaker as a trivia question. Joan says this question's too easy, so if we have that, we have a second one. Don't look it up on Google and throw your answers up in the chat. What was the first music video ever to air on MTV? I see Mary Patton got it. Yep, we got quite a few that got it. So,
Mary Patton was the first in.
So Joan's second question is, can anyone name the 5 original VJs for MTV?
Actually, if you can name one of the 5, it might be hard. I don't know that I can even name all 5. Oh my God, Alan Smith. Wait, Priscilla. Wait, I'm looking back at the chat. Wow. No, Carson Daly was not one of the originals, Randy. Sorry to disappoint you. Priscilla was first in with Alan Hunter. So this was actually easier than I thought it would be, Tom. And I think let's make sure we send Priscilla McDowell a signed copy of my book, okay?
Okay, we can make that happen.
Yeah, well, I can make that happen, I think.
All right.
Because I think you need my signature.
Yes. So Joan left corporate America in 1997 to fight for LGBT equality as the executive director of GLAAD, one of the largest gay rights organizations in the United States. And the switch was motivated by her victory in a precedent-setting case in which she became the first woman in the state of New Jersey to legally adopt her partner's biological kids. With that, I'm super excited to welcome Joan Garry. Joan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Oh, it's a big floor with a lot of people. And I see imaginary clapping. That's good. I like that. First of all, thank you very much. I am really happy to have the opportunity to be with you today. It sounds like you've had a really good day already. That you just finished with the folks from America's Promise, which is awesome. And I was telling Tom that one of the things I love about my job is that I learn about organizations I actually didn't know about. And this was one of them. And it's interesting that I didn't, because I actually play golf. I bet there are more of you that don't. I bet there are some of you that actually don't play golf, but I actually do. And I also wanted to ask, I know we got like almost 200 folks on the call today. I am right now coming to you from Spring Lake, New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore, which is just south of Asbury Park. But you have a chapter in Point Pleasant. And if the Point Pleasant person is in the house, I would love for you to just throw your name in the chat and say your name and Point Pleasant, because I would love to actually have the opportunity to come this spring. It might be just the opportunity I need to re-engage with golf. First tee, Jersey Shore, Michael. I was also telling Tom that that I think that golf is one of those games that you can be really good at one day and then totally suck at the next. Like there's sort of a lack of consistency that I think is a bit of a life lesson, and probably one of the many things that you teach kids at First Tee. I wish that my parents had learned that lesson. My father and mother of blessed memory used to play golf together. My father did not like losing. There were several broken irons that were broken over his head, at which point my mother decided that she would no longer play golf with my father. So she played golf with me, and my father played tennis. And I have very fond memories of playing golf with my mother well into her 80s. Bob says your best round is always the one you think about on the way to the golf course. That's really funny. Forgive me, I am here in my home by myself, and I bet I could send another book. What just happened outside that caused my dog to bark? Yes! Yes, it's Jeff from West Michigan. I'm sending you a copy of my book too. And actually, she really likes my mailman too. So anyway, let's get on with this. Maybe you have I think I have a few things I want to sort of share with you that I hope will enable you to really think about your board a little bit differently. Think about how you engage with your board a little bit differently. I did want to say thanks to Tom and everybody at First Tee for actually coming to Colin. And I'm from my team, Cindy Pereira, who has been working closely with Tom to cultivate what I hope will be more than a one-off with you all. Would love the opportunity to continue our connection and the professional development work. But most importantly, I want to thank you. I can't talk to anybody who is in the nonprofit sector as a leader and not just say, all right, can we just all take a moment and say that you have been through hell since the pandemic started? I mean, it has been hellish, but for those people who help other people, and that's what you do, it has been above and beyond the call of duty, which was already above and beyond the call of duty. And so I really wanted to acknowledge that. I want you to sort of take a deep breath and say, yep, if I'm out of gas, that may exactly be why. But do remember that you're out of gas for the very best of reasons. And that during that period of time, and I've talked about this with a lot of nonprofit leaders, you made remarkable things happen, right? You made things happen you didn't even think you could make happen. You tried things you wouldn't have tried. Some people went completely online with their programs, and other people did other things that I have a client who runs a community health program in Boston, and they had been planning to do telehealth, and they said, well, we think it's going to take about a year. And they did it in a week and a half, right? Because they needed to. And they did what they had to do. And that's what everybody who's a nonprofit leader had to do. So it's not like the pandemic is over, right? So I am guessing that you are all still quite a bit weary. Probably still hybrid programs, winter programs that you used to do one way, maybe you're now actually really having to rethink. I often say that business as usual in the nonprofit sector wasn't everything that it was cracked up to be before, and that the pandemic presented what I call the sort of what challenging times make possible. And so I think that we have in the nonprofit sector a lot of leaders who are both tired and proud of the work that you have done over the last, let's just say since early 2020. And if I have described you as tired, exhausted, feeling out of gas, and proud, because they're not mutually exclusive, can you just throw the word yes in the chat? You could also throw the word mailman in the chat, but that won't get you a book. Yeah, okay. So I'm getting a lot of yeses. No, Dan, you're not getting a book. Okay, so if I could turn my camera around, I would show you the audience I have here, which includes 2 animals that are sound asleep, 1 cat and 1 dog. So I'm actually glad that you look so energized, because if my audience was only these 2 pets, I would feel like I was really bombing here. Okay. So I want you to reframe. Yeah, they're tired. They're actually tired of listening to me talk about how nonprofit leaders are tired. That's it. All right. So now I want to reframe it a little. Yes, keep your hands on the keyboard, Autumn. Autumn Strong. What a name. That's an awesome name. Tell me something in the chat that you accomplished during this most unusual and terrifying of times that you are proud of. Something you are proud of. Yeah, you got a $500,000 donation. Still had programming, online, or added 7 board members. I want to come back to you. Whoever said that, you disappeared in my chat, but I want to come back to that. Got government. We're still here. Yes, Mike. Awesome. Somebody got a master's degree, got an MBA. Look at this. Our largest number of participants to date. Right? Okay, somebody should capture all of this and turn it like into t-shirts. Right? Look at this. Right? Jennifer Walker says, wow, this is what challenging times made possible. I love this. I just love everything about this. Team unity, I think Chris from New Hampshire really said something that strikes me that was true and that people take for granted, right? Is that people think, oh, well, we went remote, so it was hard to build a sense of team. I completely disagree. I think that Zoom used properly and with a shared vision of pivoting and rethinking during a pandemic brought groups together, right? Brought groups together. And I may actually ask the person who added new board members to unmute, because one of the, not right now, one of the things that I can tell you that people said to me is, oh, well, we had to close this program and we sure couldn't add new board members. I was like, this is the perfect time to invest in your board. Like the perfect time. So now I want to ask another question. Hands on the keyboards. If you're a board member and you're in the house, can you just write your first name and board? Just so I actually know if we've got board members who are here. Yes, Kevin, Bob, Beth. Okay, there's a lot of board members here. I love this. I'm glad you're here. Because the reason I am glad you're here is because I think of leadership in a nonprofit as shared, because I believe it is. I see you as co-pilots in the cockpit of a jet. So I want everybody who is a paid staff member, who is looking at this long list of board members who are volunteers, who showed up to participate and listen to me yammer for 90 minutes, I would like you to show them some love by either this, even though I can't hear it, or put bravo or thank you in the chat so that your board members can feel the love. Far too often, I think we actually see board complaining about our board as sport, a very dysfunctional sport. Oh yeah, somebody actually used the hand clapping reaction thing. Awesome. So anyway, I just want to say thank you to board members who are here. Now I'm going to start with board members. And then I'm going to show some slides, and then I'm going to open up for questions. Okay. So the question is, and I want to start with board members. In the chat, your commitment to First Tee clearly is big because you're here. Can you put something in the chat that keeps you up at night about First Tee, about your work as a board member? Could be anything from your own, the organization, or it could be your board. It could be about you and your board. What keeps you up at night as a board member? Raising money, says Tom West. Special events being successful. Sustaining, need more staff. Succession issues at all levels. Resources, more money and people. Sharing responsibilities. Board expansion, a new location for our office. How do we reconcile running golf facilities and delivering programs? These are all great. Board diversity. Excellent. Okay, you can keep them coming because I can't keep up with them. Board engagement, I'm going to talk about that, I promise. Now, executive directors, you're up. What keeps you up at night? About you, about your organization, about the work, dollar signs, budgets, Okay, so Anne Klein, and that's not the Anne Klein I'm thinking. Anne Klein says everything keeps her up at night. So we have an insomniac in the house. Not being able to give our kids at Margot is with Anne Klein. Keeping everything in check, planning. Sean Kicker, nothing. We are blessed. Okay, this is great. All right. See, I love doing this chat thing because if I did have 200 people, you all wouldn't talk this much. I swear that was true. You would not be I would not be getting as much feedback. I'd be talking at you in a room full of 200 people. But look at this. We're learning and growing together. All right, now I'm going to share my screen. I don't know you well enough to know what keeps you up at night. Okay, Eric? Okay, I'm standing back. All right. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. What do you mean, am I for real? I am totally for real. Is that a bad question? Judy McDermott, can we talk later? I hope that wasn't intended in a bad way. All right, so I'm going to share some screen, and I'm going to do some teaching. No bad. Okay. All right. All right, I'm going to hit some slides. And we're going to chat a little bit. And this workshop is called, oops, hold on. This workshop is called How to Turn Your Board into a Fundraising Machine. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I think. And I'm going to play it from the start. All right, so I'm not going to be able to see you as much anymore now because I'm sharing the screen. And I don't see the chat as well. So it's a little harder to see the chat when you are sharing a screen. So let me just grab my notes here. Okay, so I believe that there are 3 things that you need to engage your board and raise money. And I'm not just talking about executive directors. I'm also talking to board members or board chairs who are in the house as well. 3 things. 3 things. Stories, storytellers, and people to tell the stories to. Stories, storytellers, and people to tell the stories to. I want you to think about every piece of sentence fragment that was in the chat when I talked about accomplishments from the pandemic, right? So many nonprofits that I don't, obviously I'm not sure how you all approach it, but far too many nonprofits had a strategy of help me during the pandemic. It's rough on us. We've had to close our programs. We've had to go remote, right? That's not this, those are stories, but every one of those sentence fragments in that chat was a story that impressed the hell out of me, that made me really admire you. That's what we're looking for. Stories that talk to impact and ignite people's enthusiasm to want to know and do more. The second are storytellers, right? At most nonprofits, and I ran a nonprofit and I would work a room and my board members would work the room and someone would say to them, okay, so tell us a little bit about GLAAD. And they'd start to talk and they'd start to get into it a little bit. And then they'd say, but you know who can really tell you about GLAAD is Joan. Can I bring you over to meet Joan? And there was already a line of 12 people because board members just kept filing them over to me. So first of all, I can't be the only storyteller. Secondly, I wasn't going to get to all those people. And third, it actually diminished the credibility and the gravitas of the board member who couldn't tell the story themselves. The third thing you need are people to tell the story to. And I put here a diverse audience, right? You need to grow a sphere of influence that enables you to have lots new and different people to introduce First Tee to give them the opportunity to invite them to know and do more for First Tee. So I have this equation, and this is how I want you to think about board members. I want you to think about them as credible messengers. I want you to teach them how to tell compelling stories. And that if you can do that, if I can say, hi, my name is Joan Garry, and I am the board chair of First Tee on the Jersey Shore. Here's what we do. Can I tell you a quick story about something that happened just recently? Bang, bang, tell story. Would you like to know more? I have brought someone closer. I have invited them to our First Tee party. First Tee party, get it? Okay, I didn't even mean that. All right, so this is the equation that will enable your board to fundraise. Because are you actually asking them to sit down and say, will you write a check to First Tee Jersey Shore for $10,000? Boy, you would love that. But most board members aren't going to do that. And I think that we sometimes have high expectations that that's what they'll do. I just want them to grow my army of people who have been I need them to help me grease the skids and bring more people to the table. So, learning to tell a good story. When people ask me if I will do fundraising trainings, I say no, because I actually think that learning to tell a good story is actually the thing that people need to learn how to do. Because if I have a story about my interaction with First Tee, right, and I share it, and I connect it to the need, I have somebody who's going to say, how can I help? Right? You want to get them to how can I help? So I want to talk a little bit, because I'm Irish, about storytelling. Which, by the way, if you know anything about the Jersey Shore, of course I'm Irish. I have a home in Spring Lake. It's just like there's way too many of us here. Okay, so these are the components of a good story. A very quick description of the organization, your why, something called Did You Know? A quick story, followed and ended with, would you like to know more? So, quick description of the organization, I mean it. I don't want a list. I don't want a list of programs. I want you to put the person you serve, that kid, in the center. Think of it as a wheel, right? There are X number of kids like Tomas. And he lives here. He experiences this. And we exist because golf, you'll be surprised to learn that golf teaches many life lessons. You can just rattle off a couple of them. I got involved because, and then you do your because. Someone introduced me to the organization. I attended an event and I met Tomas. And Tomas impressed me. I thought Tomas would make a better board member than I. right? So I'm just kind of rambling a little bit, but I want to give you the flow of it. Then there's a did you know? Thomas is one of X number of people here in Monmouth County who have that particular profile, who need us. A did you know could be, did you know, I worked with an organization that was supporting people who were living independently over the age of 80 in New York City. Did you know that X percentage of people over the age of 80 live independently on their own and do not have the support and services they need, right? So a did you know becomes a way to make the impact or the case statement, right? You work in your quick story, and then would you like to know more, right? If they haven't already gotten to, I'd never heard of First Tee before. This is really interesting. I don't play very much golf. How can I get involved? Right? This is what you're trying to do, but it starts with a good story. Next is you've got to build a culture of storytelling in your organization. I have worked with clients, and there have been retreats where we did a storytelling exercise. Okay. And the organizations that really latch on to this idea, they practice it at every board meeting. They practice storytelling at every board meeting. Because I don't know exactly what to say is an objection question from a board member that you can erase by giving them the confidence to be a board leader, an organizational leader who can tell them stories. And so you can spend 10 minutes at a board meeting and practice storytelling. A lot of times what ends up happening is that board meetings turn into this sort of show and tell by the executive director where the board members tend to be more quiet. Get them talking. The second thing is fuel and practice this. But here's the thing. Fuel them with stories is so important. And you might, right? So I need executive directors. If you want an engaged board, you have to fuel them with stories, not book reports about what's going on and the financials and this staff member did this and this. I'm talking about 3 minutes or less impact story. Two suggestions here. One, I did something at GLAD. I knew that my board members, especially in the summer, went to a lot of cocktail parties on the weekend. And the thing I never wanted to have happen was for one of them to be asked if they were still on the board at GLAD and have them answer simply yes. We call that big, fat, missed opportunity. I wanted them to say, yeah, I am. I continue to be really proud to be a GLAD board member. And I just got this email from Joan yesterday. Can I tell you a quick story? People will always say yes as long as it's quick. And then you actually have that. And I used to send something every other week called Cocktail Party Sound Bites. So they could never say they didn't have something to say that was relatively current about something we were doing. Further, what I did was I didn't write them myself. I had my staff wrote them. And at one point I had 18 staff members. It grew to 40. You may have many smaller staff, some larger, but it works. You ask them to submit their stories to you. You curate them. And you pick the best one or two. And you fire it off to your board and say, you're going to be at a cocktail party or a dinner party or at your synagogue or something. And somebody's going to ask you, so what's new? I'm on the board of First Tee. That's the first thing. After they complain about how often they have to Venmo their grown kids' money. After they get through that, I want them to say, you know, I'm really enjoying my board service at First Tee. Can I tell you this story? I cannot believe what we were able to accomplish during the pandemic. Can I tell you a quick story? They'll always say yes. This is what we want. So that's one example of cocktail party sound bites. The other one is one that I did with Jim Cohen, who is the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Minneapolis. Okay, this is a guy who was dealing with the pandemic, and George Floyd was murdered blocks from his office. He became not just an executive director of the Jewish Federation of Minneapolis, he became a community leader. It was really, really remarkable and impressive. And I said to him during a coaching session, so your board must be like so proud of the role you're playing in the community. And he said, you know, I really haven't had very much time to tell them. I've been so busy. And so I said, do you have a cell phone? And so I had him pick up his phone. And we began a series of things called Did You Knows? And they were just 2 minutes. He'd do them from his kitchen. He'd do them wherever. And he'd fire them off to his board every week, every couple of weeks. He was able to, using the video, cut through the clutter of what board members see in their inboxes. Right? We want to move from nagging our board members to do things they aren't so inclined to do, to fueling them. Think about putting gas in their tank. When we nag them to sell tickets to events, right? That's actually a defueling exercise. So what we have to do is make them feel so ignited and so proud of First Tee with a current story right at the ready, that they're excited about sharing the information, right? The third thing you can do. Okay, many board members are on social media in one way, shape, or form. Make it easy on them, right? The Did You Know is a good example, but it could be a picture, right? A picture with a caption that they can edit just for themselves, but it's intended for them to sort of cut and paste, bang, put it on Facebook, bang, put it on Insta, right? So that they can say, and all it says is, I wanted to share the work that I'm on the board of First Tee. You can learn more here. I just wanted to say I'm really proud of the work we do. And there's a picture or a link to a story, right? We have to get visibility. We have to get more people knowing, right? You can't ask a small group for money because more often than not, they say no. So we have to ask a big group. So we have to build the group. We have to learn how to tell stories, and we have to fuel our board with stories. Next, we have to build a large audience. Who are we telling these stories to? Okay, my belief is that people equals power. People equals power. The more people who know about First Tee, the more people who hear a story about First Tee, the more volunteers, the more money, the next staff member, the next board member. But you keep the story to yourself, you don't build this army, you don't have power. This is especially true with advocacy organizations that are trying to mobilize people to pass legislation. You've just got to build an army. So this is what board members signed up for, right? They signed up for this. These are sort of basic key responsibilities, okay? And I want to talk for just a minute about the diversity of skills and expertise that your board needs. And I believe that if you're going to build a fundraising engine on your board, you actually have to build a board of diverse skills, experience, attributes, recruited through a diversity lens. Right? If you have the wrong people on the bus isn't going to go very far, right? Or you're going to spend a lot of time managing the people who are on the bus that you would prefer not be on the bus at all. But I want to So this is important. And I'll share this deck with you all. Actually, I think the presentation is getting shared as well. But you can look at this full list, which comes from Board Source, of all the different things that boards are actually responsible for doing. And I want you to think about what skills and expertise and experience do you need around that table, along with the passion for the mission that will make it the best table, right? One of the reasons that boards feel like they maybe aren't delivering is look at this list. A lot of boards don't have the horsepower, right? What do they know about monitoring program services or plan? If you don't have somebody who's done strategic planning, or like, look at all of these things. But see, that last one is enhance the organization's public standing. That's what I talk about when I'm talking about ambassadorship. If your board members start to think of themselves as ambassadors, I promise you, they will start to operate differently. Let's see what the next slide says. I don't always know. So, right. So those responsibilities demand skills and expertise around the table. They also require certain kinds of attributes, right? You could have the most fantastic HR generalist on your board, but if the person is an arrogant windbag, that's not going to help you so much, right? Because it's going to demoralize the whole team. So I want you, if you want to build a fundraising machine on your board, it's not all about teaching them to ask for money. If you thought you were coming here so that I could teach you how to ask, teach you how to teach your board how to ask for money, I'm just going about it a very different way, right? You got to get the right people on the bus who are, I think about it as, I work with some Quaker schools, and they talk about people having a light, right? Other religions might refer to it as a soul, right? You have to go looking for board members that by virtue of being introduced to the organization, that their light is shining, right? And then you have to curate intentionally for skills. Please take an intentional route towards adding board members. Don't just put butts in seats. Butts in seats boards never will fundraise for you. And by the way, getting a butt out of a seat takes a lot more emotional energy and a lot more time than waiting for just the right person to join your board. Because one person who has a particular expertise and the right attributes and a passion for first tee can actually tip your board. Doesn't have to be a whole bunch of board members. It can be a couple that add a new energy to your organization that can sing off of this song sheet and really make a difference. So I want you to think also about skills and experience, attributes and passion, but I want you to think about spheres of influence. So here is a very unprofessional slide. I think this is next, drawn by me. These are two board tables. One board will draw new people, one not so much, right? And what I want you to see here in this rather primitive fashion is that board A isn't bringing a whole lot of new people to the table. This is a conversation that happens where the executive director and the board say, oh my gosh, we need to put some more people on and we need more people around the table. Certain people are leaving and this person is turning off. And so board member number one says, I know this guy at work and I know this person down the street. That's board member number 2 and 3. They all know the same people. Board member number 5 has suggested somebody that's in his synagogue, and they generally know all the same people. They recruited board member number 6, who seems to have a very different network, and somehow or another they recruited board members number 7, who seems like some kind of loner who probably doesn't belong on anybody's board. But look at what happens with board B. Board B is an intentionally recruited board where you say, so the person at the head of the table, let's say it's me, I'm the board chair, and we've done some intentional recruiting, and I say, we decide that we really need somebody who knows something about HR. That will help us with staffing. It could help us with DEI work, right? It could help us in so many ways. And we would really like to identify somebody who might add a diverse perspective. So see what's in the foreground? HR. What's the lens? Where might we find a diverse candidate for the board who's involved in human resources? That's how you build a diverse board. So that's what's happened here with Board B. Each of these people, for the most part, have brought new people to the table, right? There are many more people to invite to the first tea party from Board B than Board A. It seems overly simplistic, but honest to goodness, it's true and it works. So let me give you an example. What this requires, I'll go back because you're not going to understand that slide until I set it up. Okay, so the other thing that we don't do a good enough job with is thinking creatively about who might be interested in first tea, right? So yeah, we're not very creative about it. And so when we are recruiting or when we are selling tickets or when we are trying to build a group of people to come to some, outdoor event, we tend to think really narrowly about the mission of the organization and who might find it appealing, right? Now, you all know better than anyone that golf is a vehicle here. But I'm going to guess that there are people who say, oh, well, I know a lot of people, but they don't play golf. Who cares? Right? Who cares? It's not about the golf. It's about the kids. Right? Do you care about kids? Does your friend care about kids? It doesn't. Who matters whether they know the difference between a sand wedge and a 9-iron? I barely know the difference, and I play golf. Okay? So this is an example of something that I did with a client. It's a children's theater in San Francisco. She's a founder. Her name is Nina. Right? Her pond, I want you to think about it as ripples in a pond, right? Because you've got to grow the size of the pond by being creative. I want you to have this exercise with your board. Who should care about your organization? And when you think more expansively about who will care about it, you'll actually start thinking about other people in different ways. So Nina starts the Bay Area Children's Theater, and we start on our board with Friends of Nina. Then we have ticket buyers, right? Then maybe we have I Love Theater. Then maybe we have I Love Children. And what I'm here to say is that many, many nonprofits never get very far outside of the first couple of rings. And they think very, very narrowly because they don't take the time to think more expansively. So Nina and I actually did this. So you're going to work creatively to look at folks who would welcome the opportunity to engage in your organization. So how about I Love the Arts, right? So that opens you up to the orchestra, think about all the arts in the Bay Area. Anybody who loves the arts, right? Fair game to be engaged and learn more about Bay Area Children's Theater. I like this one. I believe in the power of family. Families don't do enough together, right? How about a family therapist on your board? That's what she did, right? She understands that people sitting down and eating dinner together at the table, people having shared experiences with their families, build stronger families and therefore build stronger communities. And then, this is my favorite one. I want our world to be more empathetic. Nina found a study done by Young Theater for Young Americans that said that kids who touch the arts before the age of 10 are X% more likely to become empathetic adults. You tell me, like, that has me at hello. Like, I would rather have a root canal than sit through a children's performance of The Wizard of Oz. But if you tell me that what the work that Nina is doing is actually building empathy among the kids in my community, like, sign me up. This is what you need to do with First Tee. You need to think outside the box. Take a blank sheet of paper, draw circles, and get your board thinking about these kinds of things. I've done this with equine therapy programs too, right? It's like, all of a sudden you think, well, I have the kids who are autistic who come to the program and their families and their grandparents. Okay. How about people who understand the magic of horses? How about the people who provide services to kids with autism, right? You just get it bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you have a big pond to fish in. You have a profile of the kind of person that you're looking for, and you go get them. And you tell them what's really true, that being on a board is a privilege. And let's talk about meaning and purpose for just a minute. If the pandemic has not instilled in people a sense that life is short, I don't know what has, and that driving meaning and purpose in people's lives actually has gone to the top of a lot of people's lists. Those of you who know about, they're calling it the Great Resignation. People quitting their jobs because they want something more in their lives. You can give them something more. Everybody who runs a nonprofit, there are people just out there in the stands waiting to be invited on the field. You just have to get creative about who's out there to invite. So, by the way, these are just some of the examples of, again, places where if you start to be intentional about what you're looking for in terms of skills, and then you put a diversity lens on it, and then you add a dose of the creativity of the pond exercise, you're no longer operating from a place of scarcity, right? This notion of, I don't know anyone who can be on our board, this person is on too many boards, there aren't enough people who want to be on boards, this person doesn't know golf. Like, there are so many scarcity things, or that board service is some kind of an imposition. How many people work to nominate board members and they say things like, it's not that big a time commitment, right? It's not going to really be that, it's not really that hard. It's not like joining like a, board of a big organization. Like, if somebody asked me to do a volunteer job, I actually want it to be an important job. I'm actually quite accustomed to being successful. Like, I'd like to be successful. Like, you want me to join a board and then tell me it's not a very important job? Why would you do that? That's nutty. Tell me that this is an opportunity for me to transform your board, to add a skill that we can't afford ourselves, to make me feel like I'm riding in on a white horse, to make me understand how meaningful and valuable this board experience can be for me. Somehow or another, we have lost that along the way. And all of these things, when you put all of these ingredients into the organizational stew pot, and you can actually start to tackle them, the profile of your board changes. The attitude of your board changes. You fuel them with stories. They feel more competent and capable. They feel like they can be ambassadors. When you start to expand the thinking about who would be interested in First Tee, they start talking to more people. It really works. It actually really works. I've seen it work. I've been part of organizations where it really works. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about for a few minutes is, what do you do with them when you get them? Right? You want an engaged board. You want a board that is filled with enthusiastic ambassadors who see themselves as being in the invitation business. I'm not being like cryptic or giving you some kind of code that if you say it that way, what you really mean is when you go, please ask somebody for money, we have to raise $50,000 against that matching grant. And I'm getting to that in a minute, right? It's not code. It's truth. That's what we're asking them to do. But I really do. I try to be practical. In addition to opinionated and occasionally comical, is I want to talk about your board meetings. And I just want to say a couple of words about board meetings because I actually think board meetings are the single biggest missed opportunity to engage and activate your board, to invite people, ultimately to fundraise. So if you started to see board meetings as rather, instead of something that you all had to get through, if you saw them as your primary engagement vehicle to your ambassadors, you would approach them differently. You'd get your business out of the way. You'd stop talking at them and engage them in a meaningful way, right? So I have another equation here that I really want you to think about every time you as an executive director or you as a board chair design a board meeting. Oh, biggest missed opportunity. Here it is. Inform plus enrich plus engage equals ignite. The thing we are only good at most of the time is informing them, right? And here's what happens. You send out a board report. You're pretty sure they didn't actually read it. And so your executive director report, you basically highlights of your board report that you think they didn't read. Now they have no incentive to read it. So they don't read it next time because they think, I don't have to read it because Mary's going to actually just tell me what was in it when we get to the board meeting. So we spend a lot of time informing. Executive directors are type A personalities that like to show and tell and get A+ on their book reports. And so they come to board meetings saying, look at my book report. Isn't it great? Don't you want to give me an A? That's not what a board meeting is for. Enough. They already know you're great. Right? That's not what a board meeting is for. Some of that is important. But if I'm going to inform them, I'm going to inform them about something that's going to light them up like a Roman candle. Or I'm going to inform them like a partner in a cockpit of a twin-engine jet, and I'm going to inform them about something I see on the horizon that could be a challenge for us, that we can actually talk about solving together. And for those of you who say, well, my board isn't really all that equipped to help me problem solve, I say, why not? I say, if you do the other stuff right, and you curate and create an intentional board, they should be. And I'm not saying it's the ED's job to build this board. I'm suggesting it is a staff board partnership task force to identify an ideal architecture for your board, priority gaps, and then go cast for them. Enriching board members, that's the second piece. Remember, they came with their pilot lights lit. You want them to leave with them shining more brightly. My next door neighbor, Marge, is in her 80s, and she was on the board of an organization, I think in Ocean County, I'm not sure, I don't remember what it did, but it was all about sort of helping folks who lived with food insecurity. I said to Marge, during one porch sit, that's what people in Spring Lake do. They have summer porch sits. And I said, did you enjoy being on the board? I said, well, what did you like about it? She said, I learned so much. Like I was able to, I stepped outside my own privilege and I really have a deeper understanding of the root causes of food insecurity. I understand it to be a much bigger problem. And I continue to donate to that organization even though my term expired. Right? So how are you as an executive director, or do you bring people in to enrich me as a board member about the sector I care about, right? I care about kids. I care about these kids. Enrich me. Tell me about other organizations that are doing work that you're collaborating with. Bring in a funder to talk about why they fund you. enrich me. Then the engagement part is what I just described, is ask my opinion. You don't need to take my opinion as a board member, but do ask my opinion. Or I like, this is a very good framing at a board meeting. What things should I be thinking about, right? We have been approached, I'm just making something up. First Tee Jersey Shore and First Tee Point Pleasant, we're thinking about a merger. I really am making this up. Please do not let anybody panic or anything, right? And so I'm going to have a conversation as the executive director at Point Pleasant with the person on the First Tee Jersey Shore to talk about what a merger could look like. What should I be thinking about, board members? That's an engagement opportunity, right? Right? As you're solving problems, right? If you're an organization that really relied heavily on a special event, and the pandemic has actually crushed that, like really thinking expansively about how do we diversify our revenue? We were too heavily reliant on that special event. Like I don't want to go back there. Let's have a conversation about how we might do fundraising differently, less costly, right? What's out there? What other organizations do you know of and how do they fundraise? Ask me my opinion. And then if you don't take my advice, it's okay, but do circle back and say, we decided to go in this direction, but it was so richly informed by the conversation we had, and I really appreciated everyone's point of view. If you can give me a dose of each of these three things at every board meeting, you will actually ignite me to want to go and be that enthusiastic ambassador that you're going to need to raise the money to match the grant. So, 5 ways to ignite your board. Be honest, clear, and enthusiastic when recruiting. It's a big, meaningful, important job. It matters, right? Yes, we raise money and we give you stories and tools, right? Our job is to help set you up to succeed in bringing people to us in a host of different ways to bring us new resources, human and financial. Number 2, build a culture of storytelling on your board. I think it's the secret sauce, but I just told 200 of you, so it's not so secret anymore. The executive director has a job, right? You cannot just expect that my pilot light will stay lit. You have to fuel me with stories that I'm anxious to tell people. And you have to cut through the clutter because I actually have a day job, or maybe I'm on another board at the church, right? Figure out creative ways to cut through the clutter, fuel me with stories, make sure my board meeting actually ignites me in some fashion. Because I'll tell you, most board meetings actually put people's lights out, right? If you say some of my board members play Candy Crush during our board meetings, I want to know, is that a problem with recruitment? Maybe. Is it a problem with how the board meeting is designed? Maybe. Have I engaged that, I want my board to be more engaged. Like that just doesn't happen magically. Poof, we're all more engaged, right? There's a recipe to it. That's what I'm trying to share with you. Number 4, turn them into stewards. I just have to check the time just to make sure that am I doing all right, Tom, on time? 2:32.
Still have half an hour.
Okay, great. Okay, so, well, that was like the voice of God. This is an excellent strategy for getting people comfortable with fundraising. All right, let's say I'm just going to make up a number just for the purposes of example, that you have 200 different people in your database who give money, who give time, who are corporate sponsors, who give gifts in kind, right? I want every board member to have a portfolio. 5 people, no more. I mean, you can pick. I mean, talk about this with your board. And by the way, this is something a development committee on your board should own, not you as an executive director. We're going to start a stewardship program. And we are going to reach out to our 5 people 3 times a year, 4 times a year. We're going to take one of those stories, one of those did you know videos, and we're going to share it with the person in our portfolio, right? And we're going to keep them in the loop, right? And maybe it becomes an email relationship. That'd be nice. Maybe we have a phone number and maybe we call them to wish them a happy Thanksgiving and to say I'm grateful for a couple of things. One, and even if it's a nice voicemail, right? I'm grateful for many things, for my family, for my opportunity to be of service to First Tee, and I'm especially grateful to you for the contributions you've made during this last year. I hope you and your family have a wonderful Thanksgiving. One of the problems we have in fundraising is that we are transactional and not relational, and we only go back to people when it's time for them to renew. This actually allows board members to understand that board development work is about relationships and gives them the opportunity to actually cultivate and nurture a couple of them. And by the way, when it is next time for that person's renewal, let's say Tom is the board member and I am the donor, right? Tom has no experience fundraising, but he's actually done a very nice job nurturing me through the course of the year. Who'd be a good person to ask him to renew? Well, the executive director can always be a person who asks. But I think actually it'd be kind of interesting. I think Tom might actually have a greater degree of comfort about asking for my renewal because he's developed some kind of relationship with me. This is one of the things that I encourage many boards during the pandemic to do. Organizations create a stewardship program, give folks a portfolio, and have the fundraising committee on the board introduce some kind of peer accountability. Share and put something on the agenda of a board meeting where people shared successes of conversations they had with members of their portfolio. It is really remarkable how something that simple, where you as an executive director are not nagging them, but the board itself has owned this kind of program, it can actually build. It takes that culture of storytelling, it brings in relationships, and it gives them the opportunity to close gifts. This is one of the things that I talk about a lot when it comes to people who might not have wealth themselves or are not wealth adjacent. That's the jargon, right? If I have a portfolio of people that I'm stewarding and I close those gifts, I might end up being more quote unquote valuable as a fundraiser than somebody else who gives a donation but actually doesn't interact with people or invite them to contribute. And then the last one is define success for your board, right? I think this is a huge problem on nonprofit boards because I came to this board to be successful. But if I don't know what it is, like, do I know what it means to be a successful board member? Then I'm not necessarily motivated to work towards success if I don't know what it is. And I'm a person who's used to being successful. And this is actually where committees come in, right? Committees with clear charges that set goals for the year. So we just talked about nominations and governance, right? One of my goals for this year as the chair of your board nominations committee is that my committee is going to create an architecture of the ideal First Tee board. We're going to slot in our current board members, and we're going to identify gaps, we're going to prioritize them, and we're going to present at the next board meeting. And we're going to vote on that architecture, and then I'm going to lead a discussion about how we might go thinking about curating and recruiting not just prospects, but leads who could lead us to prospects. That's a good example, right? But every committee, if it has those kinds of success metrics, and I'm given the opportunity to kind of strut my stuff that I've actually done my homework so that the rest of the board can see that I'm successful, it makes me want to do more. So I think that's a really important piece. These are all the kinds of pieces that come together around this question about how do I get my board to do more fundraising? How do I engage my board? They're all ingredients in the recipe. So I want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about the power of a matching grant. And then I'm going to stop, and we can take some questions. So I think one of the biggest problems. I'm going to say it. I think one of the biggest mistakes people do with matching grants is they focus on the dollar amount. That it becomes like a blood drive, right? We're trying to get 100, I guess I don't measure in gallons. I don't know, right? This year, the Montclair, New Jersey blood drive, our goal is XDX. Let's just say gallons because it just sounds funny to me. I don't know why, right? Our goal is 100 gallons of blood between now and Christmas. Why do I care about how many gallons? Why? I mean, I can take the leap. It'll take me a few minutes, but I'm focused on the 100 gallons. I have a client that runs a suicide hotline, and he comes from McKinsey originally, and he's now the CEO, and he's been remarkably successful. He's a wonderful, wonderful man, and has a McKinsey background. And he has grown that organization. Actually, it's sad at how big that organization needs to be. It's an LGBT suicide hotline. And they are singularly focused on 1.8 million contacts by X date. And there's challenges around like pushback. Why 1.8? Well, I don't know if we can actually do 1.8, right? So I say, if you actually talked about it like young people, like somebody would say, okay, so we don't save 100,000 lives. We're going to save 1.7 million lives, right? So you have to bring it to life. You have to actually make the case. So what I want is, this is a great opportunity here now that you have this matching gift, is you need to brainstorm, or maybe you already know, right? Give me something. Let's say I'm the board chair, okay? And let's see, I guess I can't see anybody's name when we're doing this. I was going to pick on somebody. Right? What will this money make possible? What will this money make possible? The money is just a vehicle, right? If you can get me excited that says, oh my gosh, well, if we get this much money from Schwab and we are able to match it by this, holy smokes, that could, for a very small organization, that could almost double our budget. Okay, that's not even enough, right? We could increase the number of kids we serve by 40%. That's interesting. We have a program that we've wanted to start. We have a wait list. There are kids who want to be in this program, and I have to turn them away. And this money could be a game changer. Have that conversation with your board and make it about that. And say, the price tag for this is $75,000. And if I have the thing right, 50 from Schwab, we raise 25. Right? We raise 25, we get 50. Whatever the math is, right? Tom will tell me later that I was wrong. But whatever it is, right? Please, we can talk more about this in the Q&A, but please make it about what the money makes possible. Capital campaigns are, that's why capital campaigns will show you the new wing of the hospital. And they'll really start to talk about data points of, what the $200 million wing will make possible. They'll talk about new technology. They'll talk about whatever it is, right? And then they put a price tag on it. I'm not particularly invested in being the person that puts you over the $300 million mark, right? It's not about the money for me. It's about, what are you going to do with the money that's going to feel exciting, game-changing. And if it's infrastructure that sounds boring and not, not exciting, we're going to make that exciting. because infrastructure is just a vehicle too. So let me see. This might be my last slide. So I want you to be thinking about what this money will make possible for you. I'd love for that to be a conversation with your board. Engage them in that. How could we frame this campaign in such a way that they feel excited about talking about it? Right? Think about those stories. Think about storytelling. And this is the time. You have something. This is actually, a matching grant is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to say, and it's a big number when you actually look at it in its aggregate. This funder cares so deeply about First Tee. This funder is putting multi-millions of dollars behind our work. And I'm going to tell you, hell will freeze over before I'm not going to squeeze every bit of juice out of that money. I owe that to that funder. So what are we going to make possible? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I can see the chat. And I would love the opportunity to get reactions, questions, comments, things you disagree with. And Tom, if there were things that happened while I was presenting that you want to call out, please do that as well.
Yeah, we got a few over here, Joan. So the first one came from Bob Norris from First Tee Delaware. So how do I build confidence of specific board members who do not want to reach out to their networks and ask for large amounts of money or even small donations? Deep down, Bob really wants to ask about the large donations, though.
Yeah. So the first question you ask yourself, Bob, is does this board member have, what's at the heart of that reluctance? Just fear of asking for money? If it's a large donation, go with him. Go together, right? Has this person been successfully cultivated over time? Is there a way that you can do that, right? I want the organization to have a relationship with this person. I don't want it just to be your board members. So figuring out what would have to be true in order for that board member to bring that donor to you so that potentially the two of you can chat with that donor about how a gift could make a difference in the lives of the kids you serve.
Thanks, Joan. We have another question from Michael Pius at upstate South Carolina. And so this was about when you were talking about recruiting board members. And he said, so an outgoing board member should not help choose their replacement?
Should an outgoing chair help?
An outgoing board member.
Should an outgoing board member find their own replacement? Is that the question he asked, Tom? Okay.
Yeah.
So, there's actually there's a little bit of a buzz where people say part of your job is to replace yourself, but it kind of depends on whether you're a good board member or not, doesn't it? Right. I think it's not necessarily my job. If I'm stepping off, it's not my job to specifically replace myself. But if I have a particular skill set, the nominations committee should be hard at work identifying someone else who has that skill so that we don't lose it. Right. So I don't think it's not a one-to-one kind of a relationship. It's okay. We know Joan is coming off the board, so it shouldn't be a surprise, right? My term expires in December. How are we going to fill that spot? Joan brings these things to the table. Do we already have that somewhere else on the board, or do we need that do we need to recruit for that? I want you to think about it like casting a play, not like trying to find 12 people as quickly as you possibly can.
So another question, Joan, we had was from Eric Amato in Pittsburgh. And I know you had the one slide, but really maybe dive a little bit deeper. What sort of board assessment of skills do you recommend?
So I will be happy to share and I think Joy from my team is in the house somewhere, but I'm going to write it down as well. But I have a customizable composition matrix that I can make available to folks who attended. And what you do is I send it to you, and it'll be read only, but you just need to make a copy of it. And you will see in it skills, experience, attributes, and diversity as a lens. It'll be an excellent place to start that you can then, as a board, that you can customize to your specific mission and the specific needs your organization has. So should a board have legal expertise? Yes. Should a board be filled with lawyers? Please no. No, I do work with a lot of legal advocacy organizations, and lawyers are fierce advocates. It makes them great in so many ways, but they need to have so many ducks in a row before they need all the objection question. Like, they have to literally make the case for support, and the truth of the matter is, I've asked people for, tens of thousands of dollars, and they'll ask a question like, how many tickets to the gala do I get? And I have no idea. Like, I'll get you that information later, right? There'll be tickets to the gala, but here's what your money's really doing, right? So you will find on this composition matrix a real diversity of things. I am a big fan. I think that we do social. I think the sector does social media very poorly because we don't invest in it. So somebody who has experience doing digital media strategy, who might have a junior associate, who might do some pro bono work for you, that's kind of interesting to me. Public relations, depending on how small your organization is, this whole notion that I'm talking about of getting visibility. Oh goodness, would I like somebody who runs a minority public relations firm on your board? I would go to affinity groups at large companies in your cities and communities and start to look at. So I helped an organization build a board where they needed somebody to do strategic planning, and they were located in the South Bronx. And I said, you're a subway ride away from McKinsey and Bain. Like, what about outreaching to affinity groups? Big insurance companies have them as well. And they often don't really have a real charge, these affinity groups, other than an important one, which is building the visibility of that community in the company and building the leadership skills of of that community in the company. But they reached out and they met with the African American affinity group at McKinsey, and they found a junior associate who grew up in the South Bronx, didn't know anything about this organization. They stewarded him for a short period of time. He loved what he saw. There was a personal connection to their work for him, and he joined their board and he drove their strategic planning process. So that's a really good example. Now, and that's not a needle in a haystack thing. It's not as hard as you think. It does take time, and it takes intentionality. It takes a little creativity.
Awesome, Joan. Thanks. I'm going to combine the next two questions we had come in because it comes from our friends over in California.
Okay.
When you were talking about board members serving as stewards, Jasani Johnson from Central Coast kind of asked, what would you include in the portfolio? You mentioned like a portfolio of 5 donors. And Angie Dixon from Greater Sacramento kind of added and said, should the portfolio include people they originally solicited or separate donors that perhaps were not solicited?
So I'll start with the second one first. I don't care. I mean, I would like donors or people who are giving in some way to the organization to have multiple touch points. I would like them to understand, right? I certainly don't want the relationship to belong to a single person. So I would say it doesn't have to be someone they solicited. So that's the answer to the second question. And the first question, Tom, again, sorry.
What would you include in the portfolio? I guess maybe like what's a safe number or something like that.
So I would make it a doable number. I would start small so people feel success. I wouldn't give them 20 and then make them feel like they didn't do a good job because they only did 5. I'd rather give them 5 and see that they did 5. Like I said, I think the peer accountability is really important. And I think it could be a corporate sponsor. It could be a donor. It could be a lapsed donor. It could be a volunteer, right? It's an opportunity. Think about it also, too, as an opportunity for that board member to actually, if a relationship blossoms there, for the board member to really see the organization through their eyes a little bit as well. So I would make it a diverse group.
Awesome. So the next one I know is not solely associated with Chris Dewar from Northern Nevada. A couple other people said they have the same problem, that they have a couple board members that have been on their board since their inception. For Northern Nevada, that was 15 years ago, and they're no longer effective board members. So how do you get them off the board?
There's a couple of answers to this question, Chris. So I often ask people, "Oh, do you have term limits?" They say, "Yes, we do," but I forget to ask the follow-up: do you enforce them? Right? So we just keep renewing people's terms, and then they're on forever. And the anxiety is, oh, we will lose institutional knowledge. The other anxiety is we have no one to step into to those shoes. So part of what I tried to talk about today is to eliminate the scarcity model from your approach to board recruitment. The second thing is, I would love for your board nominations and governance committee to take as a goal for the year to tackle the issue of term limits, to really do some homework about, do some reading. Why do they matter? Find some stuff I've written about on my blog or anyone else to talk about the importance of building a leadership pipeline, right? If people stay, there's a couple things that happen when people stay, right? We tried that, it didn't work. That's what we used to do, right? And they can actually really demoralize new people with new ideas. Secondly, it doesn't allow for new people with new ideas into the house. So the question you've asked, Chris, is how do you move them on? So there's 2 ways to think about it. One is you actually get everybody to come to the recognition that term limits should be enforced, and you build a plan that says, this one, we're going to step off. The person who's been on the longest, your governance committee comes up with a plan, and everybody buys in. That's one way to do it. That's the best way to do it, actually. The other thing to think about is, thanks. No longer effective. So I talk about this a lot of times with board members who are actually not effective or are missing in action, right? Barely show up to meetings. You want them to feel like dead weight. And the way that you do that, no, I'm actually not kidding, is there's a rule of thirds, first of all, that this may be the last question I'll be able to answer because this might take a couple minutes. A grade B board, speaking of book reports, grade B. Let's say you have 18 board members, okay? A third of them are rock stars, they get A's. A third of them will do something if you ask, they get B's. And a third of them are dead weight. That is a good board. It's not a great board, it's a good board. So think about your board, go through the list, give them A's, B's, and C's. If you're in that general thirds, that doesn't mean it's great, but it gives you a strategy. Because here's the strategy. First of all, you're going to love up your A's. Then you're going to focus on your B's. And you're going to give them special, finite assignments. And you're going to give them the opportunity to show off at a board meeting. And that's the fast pass to moving a B to an A. And if you can get more A's and more B pluses, your C's start to feel more like the dead weight they are, and you'll find that they will think to themselves, oh, wow, those people are really committed. I don't have time to do that kind of stuff. And they self select off. It does happen. It takes a little bit longer than changing the bylaws. Donald talked about that, but it really does work. People stay on boards that are dead weight because they don't actually see themselves that way. They see themselves as busy people who do the very best they can.
Thanks, Joan. That was awesome. So I think I can speak on behalf of everybody who was on the call today. And we are so appreciative of you taking the time to talk to our chapters. You're a phenomenal resource, not only to us here at First Tee, but also many nonprofits throughout there. So we thank you.
You are very, very welcome. And I know I sent a lot your way. And I don't want you to walk away saying, oh my goodness, there's so many things I need to do differently. I don't want you to think that. I want you to think, okay, I listened to this. Take one or two of the things I talked about and pick them up and put them into action. It's a rolling stone that gathers moss. Honestly, I promise you that's true. So don't say, oh my God, that's way too long a list. I'm never going to get my board to do that. Just start with storytelling or start with an architecture of your ideal board. There are very actionable suggestions in everything I talked about today. Just give one a go. Bring your board chair. Have your board chair, if they're not on this call, have them watch this seminar have them watch and then talk about it and say, what do you think we could do differently as a result of what you heard Joan talk about? That'd be a great idea. So anyway, I'm really grateful to all of you for the work that you do. And again, do a Joan viewing party. Yes, people have done such things before. Thank you to Marty. Thanks to everybody in the chat. I really appreciate the feedback, and I hope we'll be in touch. And thank you for the good work you do.
Thanks, Joan. If I could just wrap up with a couple quick things. And this one's kind of a plug for you, Joan, but another cool fact about you is that you have an amazing online resource called the Nonprofit Leadership Lab.
I do indeed.
And it helps boards and staffs of all nonprofits thrive. And it covers a lot of things like fundraising, board building, strategy, team building, leadership, and a lot more. They have, like our peer exchange groups, the ability to kind of be part of a community of thousands of different nonprofit leaders. And so we at First Tee headquarters are looking deeply and getting involved with that. So if this is something that does interest you, I'd ask that you reach out to your DCR and just to let them know so that we can be on the lookout on how to communicate a little bit more about this Nonprofit Leadership Lab.
And I'll tell you, Tom, I see Alicia Lawrence, who is clearly already a member. So identifying those folks who are associated with First Tee that are members might be a good way to just for people to better understand what the resource is and determine if it's a good fit for them.
Awesome.
Okay.
So that's going to conclude day 2 of our virtual meeting. Like Brandon said earlier, be sure to join us at the same time tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, for our final day of the First Tee virtual fall meetings, where we bring it all together with our CEO, Greg McLaughlin. We'll answer some of the week's top questions. Plus, we'll also be giving away a grand prize, the 2022 Network Summit registration. It's a $575 value, but you must be present to win. So I wish everybody a great afternoon and have a great evening.